Good morning, brothers and sisters. Today, Pastor Joshua will lead us to study the book of 2 Samuel, chapter 1. So we have opened up a new scroll. When I share the book of 1 Samuel, so I told you about 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, 1 Kings and 2 Kings. I called it as Kings 1, 2, 3, 4. So this book is composed after the people went into exile. So after the Israel nation has fallen, and this is their reflection. So they reflected themselves. After the nation is fallen, how should they move forward? So for a nation, for the transfer of a nation, what is it like? At the end, then the nation has fallen. And how should they move forward? God promised that the nation will be revived. They will return. How should they return? And how can a nation be revived, preserved? So this is a discussion in the Kings 1, 2, 3, 4, the book of Kings. Today we will look at 2 Samuel. So how does it relate to 1 Samuel? So at the end it talks about the death of Saul at the end of 1 Samuel. So after we finish 1 Samuel, now we come to 2 Samuel chapter 1. It seems that we have something we don't understand. And it repeated the death of Saul. Why do we record the death of Saul again? And while we see the book of 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, we can see some contradictions. So we have to study this and understand this. Why it repeated recording the death of Saul, and which recording is right? So about the death of Saul, whether what is written in 1 Samuel is right, or what is written in 2 Samuel chapter 1 is right. So I'm telling you, so the last chapter of 1 Samuel is right about the recording of the death of Saul. So there is a meaning in 2 Samuel chapter 1 when it's repeated, talking about the death of Saul. Both of them are right. It is the fact how Saul died. So what I said is right is not how Saul died, and so 1 Samuel, the last chapter of 1 Samuel, said that Saul committed suicide. He killed himself. It's right that he asked his armor bearer to kill him. But the armor bearer refused to kill Saul. That's why we see in chapter 31, 1 Samuel, Saul killed himself by laying on his sword. And also the armor bearer killed himself at the same time. And this is the ending of Saul as recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 31. This is the fact. So when I look at how Saul died, I will look at 1 Samuel chapter 31. So, but in 2 Samuel chapter 1, it recorded this young man who killed Saul. And this young man is a Amalekite. The main point in 2 Samuel chapter 1 is this Amalekite. And in the history, how do we look at the death of Saul from the point of David? And what is the attitude of David towards Saul's death? So here I talk about the battle in the nations, among the nations. So from man's angle, either you are my enemy or you are my friend. But how about David? Who is David's friend? And the Israelites, they are the captives. So what is the message here? Who is your friend? Now let's look at 2 Samuel chapter 1. So the topic is why the hero has fallen. This is what David said. How did David look at Saul? So he mourned for Saul. So he mentioned that how come this hero died. Especially verse 19. How the mighty have fallen. And this verse appeared 3 times. How the mighty have fallen. In 2 Samuel chapter 1. So this is our topic for today. How the mighty have fallen. The original text for this is fallen. So there are 2 paragraphs here. First 1 to 16 is the first paragraph. The Amalekite reported the death of Saul. We can see there are 4 parties here. David and Saul, Amalekites, Philistines. So there are 4 groups of people here. So here there are 4 groups of people. So in the history we say there are 3 nations. But here we can see 4 groups of people. David, Saul, Amalekite, and the Philistines. Saul pursued after David. And the Philistines attacked Saul. And David defeated the Amalekites. So Amalekites and Israelites and Saul, they are the enemies. So God wants Saul to kill the Amalekites. So from afar, and also since Exodus, the Amalekites are the enemies of Israel. So it's also the power, dark power of Satan. And we can see the 4 relationship among these groups. So once again, Saul pursued David. But God anointed David to rise up, to substitute for Saul as king. That's why Saul continued to pursue after David. And during this process of pursuit, and David ran his life to the Philistines' place. The Philistines became his protection. And under the protection of the Philistines, then David rose up to fight against the Amalekites. Amalekites, they are the enemy of Saul. So these four groups of relationship are very confusing. So the problem here is Saul died. What should David do? This is the focus. Let's enter into the scriptures. Verse 1. After the death of Saul, David returned from defeating the Amalekites and stayed in Ziklag 2 days. This verse is very important. After the death of Saul, what is the role of David after the death of Saul? So the first verse, we see that David wasn't there when Saul died. Saul died. What was David doing? Did he participate in the battle between the Philistines and the Israelites? So once Saul died, who is going to take over the kingship? Because there are many false reports, isn't it? False news. They might say, there are many rumors, they might say that David helped the Philistines to kill Saul. So to the house of Benjamin, or the 10 tribes in the northern kingdom, David became the enemy of Saul. If people say David helped the Philistines to kill the Israelites because he went to the Philistines, how should they treat David? Should they continue to support David? Later, David rose up as king. Are we going to support him? But how about David? And how about the heart of God? And what about us? So in the early days when Saul died, the Israelites have to consider these problems, these questions. So for the Israelites who went into captivity, so for this empire, how should it move forward? Verse 1 said, after the death of Saul. The original text is, so when Saul died, when this event happened, Saul died. And David returned from defeating the Amalekites. When Saul died, David was defeating the Amalekites. He's not fighting against the Israelites. David is not helping the Philistines to fight against the Israelites, thus leading to the death of Saul. The king of Israel died. No. But David killed the Amalekites. And since then, David stayed in Ziklag for 2 days. And then Saul died. David at that time was killing the Amalekites. And he stayed in Ziklag for 2 days. He's pursuing after the Amalekites because the Amalekites plunder them. So on the third day, verse 2, on the third day, a man arrived from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and with dust on his head. When he came to David, he fell to the ground to pay him honor. Then David asked him, "Where are you from?" Verse 3, he answered, "I have escaped from the Israelite camp." David asked, "What happened? Tell me." He said, "The men fled from the battle. Many of them fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are dead." David didn't know what happened in the Israelite camp because he went to pursue after the Amalekites. And after that, he rested for a while. Because many of David's people, they were made captives by the Amalekites. So he just defeated the Amalekites and stayed there. And on the third day, a man arrived from Saul's camp. He reported the bad news. And this man said, "Saul and his son Jonathan died." He said, many people, they fled from the battle and they fell and died. He reported that the Philistines' army, they have defeated Saul, and many people in the army died. Because David cared so much for Saul and Jonathan. And verse 5, David said to the young man who brought him the report, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" And in verse 6, that young man said, "I happened to be on Mount Gibor, and there was Saul leaning on his spear with the chariots and riders almost upon him." Saul at that time was being pursued, and he was shot by the enemies. Verse 7, when Saul turned around and saw the young man, he called out to him. He asked me, "Who are you?" I answered, "I'm the Amalekite." So this young man said he is the Amalekite. Why he told David he is an Amalekite? Because he thought Saul pursuing David, and he thought David would treat Saul as his enemy. That's why he came before David. He wanted to receive the reward. "I have killed your enemy. I am Amalekite." And in verse 9, then he said to me, Saul said to this young man, "Stand over me and kill me. I'm in the throes of death, but I'm still alive." And in verse 10, so I stood over him and killed him, because I knew that after he had fallen, he could not survive. And then I took the crown that was on his head and the band of his arm and have brought them here to my Lord. He was telling David, "King David, I have killed your enemy. I'm Amalekite. Surely I have to kill Saul." Here, King David, see, here is the crown. and also this band on his arm. David saw.
那当时如果你在场，
At that time, if you were there,
跟從佢人亦都在場嘅，係咪？
當時跟着大衛的人也在場，
and David and his followers were also there.
他們都不知道掃羅已經死
而
了。
家聽到呢個少年人話，
They didn't know that Saul has already died.
但係呢個以色列嘅
And when they heard this young man
個
said,
仔都死咗啦，
現在聽到這裡少年人說，哦，
the
掃羅
Israelite
這個
army,
軍隊的人
and
都
also
死了
including Saul and his
佢
son,
殺死。
they have all
神
died.
把他殺死。
你嘅
And
反應
this
會點
young man
反應
killed
會怎麼
him.
樣？
What is your
大家到今日
response?
咧，你嘅反應一定係啱嘅，係咪？
我想大家都到今天的反應都是你是對的，
你唔會
I
話
think
哎
your
呢嘢掃羅死咗啦
response is
你不
right.
會拍掌說哦掃羅死了，
哇大衛啊
You
追
won't
殺
clap
你
your
嘅
hands and
敵
say,
人已經
"Oh,
死
Saul
咗啦，
died."
你掂啦。
大衛啊追殺你的敵人已經死了，你就可以
Or you
信你
say,
敵當天
David,
就王啦
your enemy who pursued after you died. Then you can rise up as
啲
king.
人會有咁嘅反應，
有些人會有這樣的
甚
反應，
至大衛入邊去陣
Some
營裏
people
邊
will
都會
respond
有
this
咁嘅
way.
睇法
甚至大衛陣營裡面的人也有這樣的
And
佢哋
even
都唔知道
some
大衛
of
殺掃
the
羅
people inside David's camp will have this
咁樣
response.
好啦啊
Because
唔使我哋
earlier
殺
they
呢個
asked David to
千
kill
人
Saul.
殺咗
那現在好了，不用我們殺
And
這個
today,
少年
oh,
把他
it's
殺
so
了
good. We don't need to kill Saul, but this young man
那
killed
大
him.
衛的反應又是怎麼樣？
What is David's
大
response?
衛撕裂衣服，
跟隨
David
亦都要跟
took hold of his
跟隨
clothes
他的
and
人
tore
也
them.
是一樣要跟着，
悲哀哭號
And
禁
his
食到
follower,
悲哀
do the
哭號
same.
禁食到晚上。
verse 12, they mourned and wept and
因
fasted
為
till
掃羅
evening
和
of
他兒
Saul
子約拿單並耶和華的民
for
以色
Saul
列
and
家
his
的人
son Jonathan.
都在刀下。
因
For
為
the
掃羅
army
和
of the
他兒
Lord
子約拿單
and the
並
house
耶
of
和華的民
Israel,
以色列
because
家的人
they have
倒在
fallen
刀下
by the
大
sword.
衛聽到追殺佢嘅掃羅同埋以色列家嘅人倒在刀下，佢唔係開心。佢唔
Upon
係
hearing
大衛聽到追殺他
that
的掃羅
the
和
Saul,
以色列人倒
who
在
has
刀
been
下，他
pursuing
不是
after
開
him,
心，而是
being
悲傷。
killed,
大衛
and
就
also
問
all
呢
his
個報信嘅
family
少年
members died,
你係
David
哪裏
was
嘅
so
人
sad.
大衛就問着報信的少年人：“你是哪裡
And
人
in verse
前已經
13,
講咗佢係亞瑪力
David
人
said to the young man who brought him the report, "Where are you
在
from?"
佢再問
He
呢個
he already
人
told him he is an Amalekite. Then he asked this young man again,
其實呢個人睇到大衛悲傷喎，
其實這
Who
個
are
人
you?
看到大衛悲
"Where are
傷
you from?"
點解
In
大衛唔
fact,
係
this
開
young
心
man
嘅
saw
佢係悲
David's
傷嘅
sadness.
大衛不是開心而是悲
佢
傷。
嚇一跳。
Why David is not happy
再
but
問佢
so
係
sad?
然後大衛再問他，
He's shocked.
今次唔敢講話
And then
我係
David
亞瑪
asked him,
這次他
"Who
不
are you?
敢講我是亞瑪
Where are you from?" This time he dare not say, "I'm an Amalekite." He said,
人的兒子
he answered,
他說我是亞瑪力人
second half of
的兒
verse
子
13, "I'm the
其實我哋
son
係喺
of an
亞瑪力
alien,
嗰度㗎
an Amalekite."
我是在亞瑪力人那裡，
我係亞瑪力
Yes,
人
we
其中一
are
個
in
客
among the
人
我
Amalekites.
是亞瑪力人其中一個客
即係
人，
一個
I
foreigner 嚟
am
嘅
one of them.
我是那邊
I'm
的
the
foreigner
son of an
即係
alien.
即
I'm
係
only a
亞瑪力人嘅
foreigner.
foreigner，不過住喺亞瑪力啫。
我是亞瑪力人
That
的
is,
，foreigner，住在
the
亞瑪
Amalekites
力
foreigner,
即係
but
話我
I
係
dwell
亞瑪
in
力
the
嘅客
place.
家人
我是亞瑪力人的客家人，
嘅仔，
That is, I'm a foreigner among the Amalekite. I'm the son of an alien.
轉彎啊，
他要轉彎了，
因為佢睇到
He has to turn around
係開心，
因為他看見大衛
佢
不是
原
開
本諗
心，
住
because he saw that David wasn't happy hearing this news.
原本他想報這個假消息，
Originally,
他
he
就可以
thought
但係大
by
衛
reporting
哀傷
this news to David, he received the reward. But he saw David being so sad. That's why he had to turn
係
around.
話你伸手殺害
But
耶和華嘅受膏者
David has not
說你伸手
let
殺
him
害耶和華的受膏
twist
者
around.
怎不畏懼呢？
怎麼
Verse
不畏
14,
懼
David
呢
said, "Why were you not afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's
因為大衛
anointed?"
唔知道係掃羅自己自殺嘅。
對大衛來說，大衛不知道掃羅是自殺的。
To David, he didn't know that David killed himself, Saul killed himself.
而家第一個傳俾佢就係呢個亞瑪力少年，
因為才過幾
because it's only a few days after the death of Saul.
所以大衛了
He
解
didn't
啊係呢
receive
個
the news
亞瑪力
until this young man
大
came.
衛的了解就是这亚玛力人杀了
所以
他。
佢就話
So
啦點解
David
你殺
understood
耶和華嘅
why
受膏者
it is
唔驚
this Amalekite who
说
killed
杀耶和
Saul.
华的受膏者怎么不怕呢？
That's why he asked this young man, "Why were you not afraid to lift your hand to destroy the Lord's anointed?"
你去杀了他吧。
Then he called the young man.
少年
David asked this young
將
man
呢個
to
報
kill
惡性
him,
嘅
to
亞
kill
瑪力
this
人殺死
Amalekite.
少年就出去把这个报恶性的亚玛力人杀了。
So David's man, killed this
而
Amalekite.
且我自己也很感动。
I'm really touched
大卫的
when I see these scriptures. David's heart.
掃羅追殺佢，
扫罗追杀他，
佢冇為掃羅死
Saul
而開心
has been
没有
pursuing
因為
after
扫羅
him.
死而開心。
佢因
And
為
David is
耶和
not
華
happy
受膏者
because
死
Saul
他難
died.
過
他因着耶和華的受膏者死了，他難過。
因為以色
But
列
because
家敗
the
亡
Lord's anointed died,
以
David
色列
was
家
very
敗亡
sad.
他難過
佢哀傷，
他
David
佢
was
將
so
呢
sad because the nation of
個信
Israel
呢個
has
少年
fallen.
殺咗佢
他將這個報惡性的少年殺了。
And he
因為
killed
以色列
this
王
young man who reported this news.
你竟敢殺掃羅，
你
And then he
殺掃羅
revenged for the king of Israel. How dare that you kill Saul, and then I
對
kill
被
you.
擄嘅以色列人嚟講，
對被擄的以色列人說，
王朝點樣繼
To
續
the Israelites, to the under
唔係
captivity,
四國多
how can an empire continue?
多方你與誰結盟啊？
不是在四國這個多方關係中，
It's
你
not
去
to make
誰
alliance with among these four groups of people, among the different
唔係與
nations.
非利士結盟，
You're not making alliance with the Amalekites, making alliance with the Philistines.
不是，
一切都喺神嘅手中。
一切
It's
都在
just
神手
escape from Saul. No. Everything is in the hands of
掃羅
God.
自己就死喺亞瑪力人手下，自殺啦佢。
掃羅就自殺了。
Saul
在
died
死在亞瑪力人手中。
under this young man Amalekite.
自己走去揾靈媒啦，係咪？
撒母耳記上講到掃羅自己去
So
找
in
靈
the book of
媒
1 Samuel, it recorded
他很怕
that Saul himself went to look for the medium. He's
他就在黑
afraid.
暗當中出去
食咗佢嘅最後嗰一餐，
So in darkness, he went out
然之後好英雄式
and had his last
然後
supper.
很英雄式的死去。
And he died as a hero.
大衛咧，
那大衛呢？
佢唔在場，
他不在場，
For David,
殺亞瑪力人，
他死
he's not
殺
there.
亞瑪力人，
佢冇
He
參與
killed the Amalekites.
掃羅嘅戰爭。
他沒有參與非利士人和掃羅的
He
戰爭。
didn't participate in the battle between the Philistines
佢都將佢殺。
and King Saul.
亞瑪力少年人來報信，他也把他殺了。
And at the end, when this young man
知道
from Amalekite came to report the news, he killed him. David didn't know that King Saul had
佢
died.
後來上嚟繼承皇位咧，
而他後來上來繼承王位，
And later,
係神嘅
then he was made
神的
king
帶領。
佢並唔係去殺死
as
掃羅
led by
然之後
God.
自己做王
他並不是去殺了掃羅，然後自己做王。
He didn't kill Saul himself
對於
to
被
make
擄嘅
king.
以色列人嚟講，
所以對於被擄的以色列人來講，
佢哋
So to the Israelites
他
under
們
captivity,
亡國被
王
擄了
國點樣繼續落去咧？
王
the
國
nation has
怎麼繼續
fallen.
下去
They went into exiles.
唔係你與邊個去
And
聯
how can this kingdom
不是
continue?
你去與誰連接
It's
你嘅
not
心仍然
to
歸向
whom they should make the
仍然
alliance.
歸向神
仍然遵守神
Is that your heart still turn to God?
行喺神嘅心意當中，
Still keep the commands of
神會
God?
自己報仇。
神會
To
自己
walk
報
in the
仇
will of God? God will
唔
revenge
係
himself.
掃羅嘅敵人就係你嘅朋友嚟嘅，
不是說掃羅的敵人就是你的朋友
追，殺你嘅人，
追
It's
殺你
not
的人
that
佢
a
嘅敵人
source
就係你嘅朋友，唔係嘅。
enemy.
人就是你的朋友，不是的。
知唔知我講緊咩啊？
知不知道我在講？
His enemy is your friend? No.
亞瑪
唔
力人
係你嘅朋
Do
友，
you know what I'm talking about?
甚至非利
The
士人都唔係你
Amalekites
嘅
is
朋友
not your friend.
也不是你的朋友，
Even the Philistines is not your friend.
耶和華先係我嘅朋友。
耶和華才是我的朋友。
The
一切都
Lord
喺神嘅
is my
一切都在
friend.
神的手中。
神
Everything is in the hands of God.
高咗掃羅做王，
神高了掃羅做王，
現在神唔要掃羅，
So God
神
anointed
高掃羅，
Saul as king.
掃羅嚟追殺你，
But now,
来追杀你？
God has forsaken Saul.
仍然尊重
So what happened if Saul came pursue after you?
受膏者，
看重神的受膏
We
者，
still respect
睇翻
God's anointed one.
仍然心连在你自己的国家，
And your heart is still connected
仍然你
with your
心连
nation.
于神。
Your heart is still
这个也
connected
呢
with
個亦
God.
都係俾
This is
被擄當
David.
中嘅以色列百姓嘅信息。
这个也是给被掳当
This
中
is the
以色列
message to the Israelites under captivity.
那个信息，
亦都係俾我哋今日嘅信息。
也是给我们今天的信息。
今日我哋
This
都面對
message is also for us
今天
today.
我们也面对列强争霸。
中美好似
Today, we
爭霸
also face all the nations fighting against each other, like the
如果你睇 YouTube，有
Sino
好多呢啲信息，
American War,
很多这
the
些信
battle.
息
我叫大家
If you look at YouTube, there are a lot of messages.
好多
I ask you
亞馬力
not
嘅
to look
假
at
信
those
息嘅
很多
news.
亚玛力的假信息，
There are many fake reports of the
宣
Amalekites.
傳，
很多是宣傳，
好多係捏造
Many of them, they just want to advertise themselves.
嘅宣傳嘅
And
機
they are fake
是宣傳的
news.
機器，
但係佢會勾住人嗰個
So
心，
this is the way how they advertise themselves.
然之後咧，當同人死
Because people, they want to know more, they want to read
網上
more.
啲嘢呢
And then they brainwash people.
係要篩選嘅，
所以網上的東西大家要篩選。
因為我自己係讀
So
書
I want you to have discernment when you look at the news in the website, because I'm like a news reporter.
邊啲唔係，要識得去分辨。
我要分
I
辨
worked as a news reporter before, so I know I have to discern which type of news they are fake news or they are the
但係如果你
right
唔知一路
news.
睇落你會俾佢吸引
So
住
when
你
I
一路
look at the
一路
video, I know
會
some of them are
睇
fake news.
知道的話，你就會被它吸引，你就會一直看。
But if you don't know, you don't know how to discern, you'll be attracted by all these YouTubes, all these videos. Then you spend a lot of time, you wasted your time, and you are being brainwashed.
各方都係做緊各方要做嘅嘢。
其實各方都在做各方要做的事，
Because different parties, they are making their own news, working on their own
真的是每个
tactics.
列強在爭霸。
And we know that. I can see the different
香港亦
nations,
都係面對
they
呢個
are
衝擊
fighting against each other. What should we
有
do?
很多的衝擊，
Even Hong Kong is having that
都
confrontation.
動搖，
香港也在動搖，
所以好多人走啊，
所以有很多
Like
人
Hong Kong is now shaking.
好多人亦都向香港
That's why many people are
向香港招
going away, leaving Hong Kong. And many people say to Hong Kong, come to our
覺得他
nations.
們真的這麼愛香港人嗎？
You think they really love the Hong Kong
各有
people?
各嘅居心。
各有各的目的和居心。
Because they have their own motives and purposes.
要連於非利士，
For our heart,
非利士，
我哋嘅心
we should not
連於
connect with the Philistines.
亞瑪力，
Our heart
連於亞瑪力，
should not be connected with Amalekites.
於神，
我們的心要連於神，
走在神
Our heart must be connected with God,
走在神具備的道路裡面，
遵行
to walk on the ways prepared by God,
委身喺
to keep the commands of God,
委身
and
在
His
神
teaching.
我們的使命和意向裡，
commit ourselves to God's vision.
當然係好黑暗。
Let us not be
好似
shaken.
大衛都走過好多嘅黑暗，
Even though
像大衛也
if the
走過
world
很
is
多的黑
full of
暗
darkness,
大衛越
like
走
David's
越
been
行呢係越強。
walking through a lot of
大衛是越走
darknesses.
是越強的，
啊從一
But
個
as
人
we
嘅
see
手
David, as he continued to walk, move forward, he becomes stronger.
亞比亞他又嚟跟佢啦，
慢慢亞比
From
亞他又
being
來
one
跟他
person,
以弗得嚟跟佢啦，
帶着以
and
弗得
then
來跟着他
Abiathar followed
有
him,
咗400人
bring the ephod,
有400
喺
人
亞杜蘭洞啦，
在亞都蘭
and
洞
then he had 400 people as his followers inside the Adullam cave.
了600
And
人
many needy people came to look for him. And then it increased to 600 people.
就成為王。
他就成了王，
And step by step,
使自己
he became
對
king.
付掃羅，
不用自己去對付掃羅，
唔使
He
自己
didn't
聯繫
need
啲
to
亞瑪力
deal with Saul by himself.
聯絡
去
亞
打擊
瑪力
掃羅，
去打擊掃羅，
He didn't need to connect with Amalekites
投靠
to
非利士。
defeat
去
Saul.
靠非利士，
其實投靠非利士，佢差啲自己
He
都有問題。
didn't need
他
to
投靠非利士
trust
差
the
點自己就
Philistines.
出問題了
In fact, in the early stage, he himself had trouble.
在今天这样环境
What should our heart be like
我们要
in
紧
this
紧黏
big
于
environment?
心在神
We
心
must be
里
closely connected with God to walk in the will of
我
God.
就没有時間講17
So we
節到最後
don't
最後呢一
have
首係哀
time
歌嚟嘅
to continue with verse 17 until the end.
三次
Though this is the lament,
係第
David's lament for
出現了
Saul
三
and
次大英雄可
Jonathan.
敬死亡呢
Verse 19, how the mighty have fallen. It
英雄
appears many
何竟
times
在
in
陣
verse
上仆倒
25.
約拿單何竟在山上被殺。
英雄何竟在陣上撲倒，約拿單
How the
何竟
mighty
在
have
山上
fallen
被
in
殺
battle.
27節
Jonathan
英雄
lies
何
slain
竟
on
仆
your
倒
heights.
佔據何竟
Verse 27,
27節，英
how
雄
the
何
mighty have
竟
fallen.
倒佔據
The weapons
何
of
竟
war
滅
have
沒
perished.
大衛不斷講
大衛不斷講，
掃羅英雄，
David continued to say this.
掃羅係大英雄，
掃羅
Saul, the
大
hero.
有能力，
掃羅大
Saul is the great hero,
何
full of power,
大英雄
mighty in
何竟
power.
死亡，
大英雄啊！你點解
The
會死
mighty, how the mighty have
大
fallen.
英雄啊！點解你要死啊？
Oh, you are such a big hero. How come you
約拿
died?
單啊你點解
Why
被殺
have you
啊
約拿
died?
單你何竟被殺呢？
Jonathan, why are you
天
killed?
問
問神
問神，
問天，
So he asked God.
亦都表達佢嘅哀傷，
He asked
哀
heaven.
傷，
但係佢
He
對
expressed
掃羅嚟講佢肯定
his
掃羅係英雄
lamentation.
但是對他來說，他肯定
But
掃羅是英雄，
He
佢好似
affirmed Saul as the
他
hero.
冇否
He accepted
佢冇
Saul.
否定掃羅。
他沒有否定掃
He
羅。
didn't
呢個俾我哋一個
denounce
嘅提醒，
那這裡給
Saul.
我們一個提醒，
追殺
It
你
gave
嘅
us a
人唔需要
reminder.
否定佢嘅喎。
追殺你的
For
人
those
你
who
不用
pursue
否定
after
他
you, you
有
don't
神
need to
恩膏
denounce
佢，
them
亦都有佢嘅軟弱喎。
有神恩膏他，也
because
有
God
他的軟弱
anointed him or her, but they have their own weaknesses, and God will deal with them.
我們要接納
We
別
have
人
to accept the weakness of others.
仍然肯定掃羅。
他仍然
David still affirmed Saul. May God help us.